When I returned home from the hospital, my body still ached, my legs trembled, and the fresh incision from surgery burned beneath my clothes. 11 long days of battling infection and fear had left me exhausted. I had fought to stay alive, clinging to the faint hope that when I woke up, someone would be there, someone who cared, but no one came. Gregory, my only son, hadn't visited once. His wife, Michelle, didn't call or even send a message. When the doctor finally discharged me, I had to ask a nurse to call a cab. There was no one waiting outside those hospital doors, no one. I reached home holding on to a foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, I would find a warm note, a bowl of soup, or a sign that someone had worried. But when I opened the door, silence greeted me. Then I saw it, a second refrigerator, large, modern, and gleaming beside my old one. For years, that old fridge had been a faithful companion in a kitchen that once echoed with family laughter. Now it stood next to this shiny intruder like a relic beside a monument. Gregory appeared from the living room, beer can in hand, as though nothing was out of place. Michelle followed him, clutching adhesive labels and a permanent marker. "What is this?" I asked, pointing at the new appliance. Gregory took a sip of beer. "It's our fridge, Mom, for our things. Our fridge." I repeated, confused. Michelle knelt and began labeling every shelf. Shelley, 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 writing her name in thick black letters that burned my eyes. "This one's for our groceries," she said coldly. "We don't want them mixed with yours." I stood there, numb, the weight of disbelief pressing down harder than my healing wound. "But this is my house," I whispered. Gregory laughed dryly. "Yeah, Mom, your house, but we live here too. And with your meager pension, you can't afford the things we like. We're just trying to stay organized." Michelle smiled with satisfaction, admiring her work. "Don't take offense, Elinor. It's just practical. Don't take offense." Those words sliced through me like knives coated in sugar. My voice broke when I finally managed. "I've never denied you anything from my fridge." Gregory crushed his beer can. "We know, but this is fairer. You buy your things, we buy ours affair." That word echoed inside me like a cruel joke. My half-empty fridge stood like a symbol of my shrinking world, while their new one overflowed with expensive cheeses, imported meats, and wines that cost more than my weekly groceries. Michelle opened the door proudly. "We have standards," she said. "We don't like eating what you eat." I wanted to scream, to remind them that I'd worked 35 years in a factory to raise Gregory, that I'd sold my mother's jewelry to pay for his education. But my body refused to fight. Pain from the stitches pulsed through me, and I realized I had no strength left for confrontation. "I'm going to rest," I said weakly, dragging my hospital bag toward the small back room. Gregory muttered, "Sure, Mom, rest up," already turning back to his TV. Michelle closed her shiny new fridge with a loud, satisfied thud, a sound that seemed to echo through the entire house and into my chest. I walked slowly down the hall to the small room that used to be my sewing corner. Now it was my exile. Gregory and Michelle had moved in a year ago, just until we find something better. They'd said. They never found it. Instead, they had claimed my home piece by piece, the master bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, until all that remained for me was this narrow space with its single bed and fading wallpaper. I sat on the bed and cried silently. Outside, their laughter and clinking glasses floated through the air, cruel reminders of my invisibility. Maybe they were celebrating their victory, the moment the old woman finally accepted her place as a burden. Each laugh from the living room sounded like a nail sealing my coffin of humiliation. When I closed my eyes, I saw those labels, Shelley, 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 burned into my memory like brands on leavestock. I remembered the promises Gregory had once made, the son I had loved with all my heart. I remembered his birth, the way I'd held him like a miracle after years of loss. I remembered my late husband, Bernard, who had worked himself to death on construction sites to give us security. And now, this was what remained. mockery and rejection under the same roof we had built with love. As I lay there, the sorrow began to shift into something else, something sharper, heavier, alive, rage. I had endured too much for too long. The woman who had always yielded, forgiven, and sacrificed had died somewhere in that hospital bed. The one who had come home was different. She had nothing left to lose. In that moment, a decision began to form inside me, slow and steady like steel hardening in fire. They thought I was weak. They thought I would stay silent forever. But they were wrong. When the morning came, they would learn who Elinor Hayes truly was, and that lesson would cost them everything. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to their laughter echoing through the walls. I realized that to them, I was not a mother anymore. I was a wallet, a maid, a nuisance. But as my tears dried on my cheeks, I whispered into the darkness, "You made a mistake." It was the first time in years that my voice held power. Morning would bring reckoning. I woke up before dawn, the room dimly lit by the faint glow creeping through the curtains, my body heavy yet strangely calm. My stitches still tugged painfully, but compared to the ache inside my chest, it was nothing. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake Gregory and Michelle. They were asleep in my room, in the bed I had once shared with Bernard, beneath the sheets I had bought with my first retirement check. Every step I took felt like walking through the ruins of a life I no longer recognized. The house smelled of wine and perfume, foreign scents that had replaced the warmth of home. When I reached the kitchen, the new refrigerator gleamed in the half light, its metal surface reflecting my tired face. Those labels, Shelley, 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 seemed to mock me silently. I opened my old fridge. Inside, there was so little: 3 eggs, a bit of bread, cheap cheese, a carton of milk. That was all. Then I opened theirs, and the sight struck me like a blow. Rows of expensive meat, imported cheeses, wine bottles, shrimp, and fruits I could barely pronounce. They dined like royalty while I scraped by in my own house, surviving on leftovers. I closed it gently, my hands trembling not from weakness, but fury. For the first time, I saw the situation clearly. This was not just neglect or disrespect. It was exploitation, carefully disguised as dependency. I sat at the table and thought about everything. I could throw them out. It was my house. But Gregory had made me sign a document months ago. He had told me it was to update the will and keep things in order. I trusted him then, as I always had, and signed without reading. Now that memory filled me with dread. What if I had signed away my home? I could leave, start fresh somewhere else. But with what money? My pension barely covered my medicine and bills. The reality was brutal. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own home. I heard their footsteps upstairs, the sound of water running, Michelle yelling about shampoo, Gregory muttering in response. Not once did they mention me. Not once did they ask how I had slept after my surgery, or if I needed anything. It was as if I didn't exist. Around 9, I heard the car start and the door slam. They were gone. I waited for a few minutes, then stepped out of my room. The house was a disaster. Dirty dishes in the sink, clothes on the sofa, food wrappers everywhere. On the counter lay half-beaten salmon and cream cheese, left uncovered and buzzing with flies. I began cleaning not because I wanted to, but because habit controlled me. Decades of being a mother, a caretaker, had wired me to tidy up even the messes of those who hurt me. As I washed the dishes, I glanced out the window and saw Beverly Jenkins, my neighbor. She was watering her plants in her neat garden, sunlight glinting off her silver hair. She was 70, a widow like me, yet she looked content, free. I had known her for 20 years but never truly spoken to her. Still, seeing her there stirred something inside me, a longing for that peace she carried so effortlessly. Beverly looked up, noticed me, and waved. I waved back weakly, embarrassed by my puffy eyes and disheveled state. Then, to my surprise, she set down her watering can and started walking toward my house. My first instinct was to hide, but something stopped me. Maybe I needed to be seen. She knocked softly, and I opened the door. "Elinor," she said warmly, "I saw you come home from the hospital. How are you?" I wanted to say I was fine, but the lie caught in my throat. "I'm getting better," I whispered. Her eyes softened. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded. We went to the kitchen, and she immediately noticed the two fridges. Her gaze lingered on the one covered with Michelle's labels. "That's new," she said carefully. "It's for my son and his wife." I explained, feeling shame rise in my chest. Beverly's expression shifted, sadness mixed with concern. She sat down quietly and then spoke with unexpected seriousness. "Elinor, forgive me for being forward, but I've been meaning to say something for months." My heart thudded. "What is it?" "I hear things," she said gently, "through the walls, the way they talk to you, the way they treat you. It's not right." I looked down, unable to meet her eyes. "Last night," Beverly continued, "I heard what they said when you came home, about the fridge, about your pension." My eyes filled before I could stop them. She reached across the table and held my hand. "And after you went to bed, I heard more." I froze. What did they say? Beverly took a breath as if preparing herself. "They were drinking wine, laughing. Michelle said, 'It won't be long now. The old lady can't last much longer. When she's gone, the house will be ours.' Gregory laughed and said, 'I hope she hurries up. I'm tired of pretending to care.' The world seemed to tilt. My ears rang. My son, my only son, had wished me dead. Beverly squeezed my trembling hand. "I'm so sorry, Elinor. I didn't want to tell you, but you deserve to know the truth." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce. "I've seen other things, too. Gregory's been going to the bank a lot lately, always with papers. And Michelle's been getting packages, expensive ones. Designer boxes, jewelry, clothing. You should find out what's going on." My thoughts spun wildly. What were they planning? How much worse could it get? I don't even know where to start. I admitted, barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do it alone," she said. "I have a friend, Darther Dawson. He's a retired lawyer. He helps people in cases like this, people who are being abused by their own families." The word abuse felt heavy on my tongue. I had never seen it that way. To me, they were just ungrateful, cruel, selfish. But abuse, that word fit too perfectly. "Would you talk to him?" Beverly asked. I looked around the room, the labeled fridge, the dirty dishes, the emptiness of what used to be my home. For the first time, I saw it for what it truly was. Evidence of a crime disguised as family. "Yes," I said quietly but firmly. "Yes, I'll talk to him." Beverly smiled, a kind of proud, motherly smile that filled the room with warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Good," she said, pulling out her phone. "I'll call him now. He can come this afternoon while they're gone." As she spoke to Arthur, I listened to her calm, steady voice explain my story. My pain turned into facts, my humiliation into something that could be fought. When she hung up, she said softly, "He'll be here at 3. Gather everything you have, documents, statements, anything they've made you sign." I nodded, feeling the faint stirrings of hope rise in my chest. After she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the 2 refrigerators. But now, they didn't just represent my humiliation. They represented proof of manipulation, of greed, of cruelty. And when Arthur arrived, I would be ready. The hours until 3 o'clock crawled by like years. I moved through the house slowly, collecting every document, every receipt, every scrap of paper that could expose the truth. I began in what used to be my bedroom, the space Gregory and Michelle had claimed as their own. When I opened the door, a wave of Michelle's perfume hit me, sweet and artificial, coating everything like a stain. Clothes were scattered everywhere, the bed unmade, and expensive boxes lined the wall. They were just as Beverly had described, designer brands, glittering names I had only ever seen in magazines. I knelt beside one and lifted the lid. Inside was a pair of heels so costly they could have paid half my bills for the month. Another box held a handbag with the tag still attached. Each item screamed extravagance, carelessness, greed. I felt a mix of fury and heartbreak. How could they claim poverty while drowning themselves in luxury? I checked the closet next. More new clothes, a rainbow of fabrics and labels, some still wrapped in plastic. Gregory's suits hung beside them, and on the shelf sat a row of watches, 4 gleaming faces lined neatly in a case. I recognized one. It was supposed to be a Rolex, though I doubted it was real. Even so, it cost more than I had seen in one place in years. None of this made sense. They had told me they were broke, struggling, desperate. And yet, here was the proof of their deceit shining under the dim bedroom light. I went through the drawers, heart pounding, in Gregory's nightstand, and I found receipts. Bars, restaurants, casinos. One showed $500 loss in a single night, 3 weeks ago. My hands shook as I stuffed the papers into a folder. In Michelle's drawer, I discovered several credit card statements, 3 in total, each with massive balances, $20,000, $8,000, $5,000. $33,000 in debt. But what froze my blood was the 4th statement. It bore my name, Eleanor Hayes, $10,000. Dollar limit, $9, 950 used. I had never owned such a card. Every purchase on it, furniture, electronics, fine dining, belonged to them. Gregory had opened a credit card in my name. My throat tightened. That was not just betrayal. That was a crime. I searched further, finding contract after contract with my signature scrawled at the bottom. My mind reeled. When had I signed all these? And then it hit me. Every time Gregory had come with papers, smiling, saying, "Sign here, Mom. It's for insurance, for taxes, just a formality." I had trusted him blindly like a fool. I thought I was helping my son. All along, I was helping him steal from me. At the bottom of one pile, I found a document that made my knees weaken. A home equity loan application against my house for $50,000. My house, the only thing Bernard and I had built together. The application was marked as pending approval. I sank onto the edge of the bed, shaking so hard the paper crumpled in my hand. They were trying to take it. Not after I was gone. Now, while I was still breathing, I gathered everything and took it to my small room, hiding it under the mattress. Then I climbed onto a stool and reached for an old cookie tin on top of the kitchen cabinet, where I had always kept important papers. My pension statements, my medical bills, my bank records. I opened them one by one. The truth unfolded before me like a nightmare written in numbers. Transfers I didn't remember authorizing $5, 100 here, $8, 100 there, $1, 0. $0 more somewhere else. Month after month, subscriptions to services I'd never heard of, gym memberships, gourmet deliveries, streaming platforms, all charged to my account. By the time I finished counting, I realized nearly $20, 0. 0 had vanished in just 6 months. My son had stolen it all. The man I had raised, fed, and loved had drained me like a leech. I pressed my trembling hands to my face and sobbed, not the quiet tears of sadness I had cried before, but deep animal cries of rage and betrayal. At 2:30, I arranged everything neatly in a folder. The bank statements, receipts, loan forms, fraudulent credit applications, all the evidence of what Gregory and Michelle had done. It wasn't just exploitation now. It was elder abuse, financial fraud, identity theft. Crimes with names, punishable by law. When Beverly knocked at 3, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a tall man in his 60s with silver hair, calm eyes, and an air of quiet authority. "Eleanor," Beverly said softly, "this is Arthur Dawson." He stepped forward and shook my hand. His grip was firm but kind. "It's a pleasure to meet you, MS Hayes. Beverly told me what's happening, and I want you to know. I'll help you, no charge. This is personal for me." "Personal?" I asked as I led them to the kitchen table. "My mother went through something similar," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "My brother took advantage of her, just like your son has with you. When I found out, it was too late to save her. She died feeling betrayed. Since then, I've made it my mission to help people like you." His words hit me deep in my chest. Someone understood. I wasn't alone anymore. Arthur opened a notepad. "Show me everything you've found." I spread the documents across the table, each page, each receipt, like pieces of my shattered trust. He examined them with the precision of a surgeon. His face darkened as he read. "This is serious," he said finally. "What your son has done amounts to multiple felonies: fraud, forgery, theft, financial abuse. Each could lead to prison time." I swallowed hard. "He could go to jail." "Yes," Arthur said, "if you choose to press charges. But before that, you have options." He drew 3 lines on his notepad. "Option 1, confrontation. You show them what you know, demand repayment, and try to resolve it privately. It's quick, but rarely works. Abusers deny everything." I nodded. That sounded exactly like Gregory. "Option 2, he continued, civil action. You sue for damages and restitution. It takes longer, but you get your money back legally. And option 3, criminal prosecution. Fraud, identity theft, elder exploitation. If you pursue this, they'll face arrest and conviction." His voice was calm, but the words felt like thunder. Beverly placed her hand on mine. "You don't have to decide now," she whispered, but Arthur pointed to one paper. "The home equity loan. This one needs immediate action. If that loan is approved, you could lose your home within days. We'll block it first thing tomorrow." "How?" I asked, terrified. "You'll go to the bank with me. We'll freeze your accounts, change all passwords, remove your son's authorizations, and notify the fraud department. Then we'll put your property under a trust so no one can touch it without your consent." The plan sounded overwhelming, but for the first time I felt direction. "And what about them?" I asked. "They're still here, still living off me." Arthur leaned forward. "That's your choice. You can start eviction procedures legally. It will take weeks. Or you can confront them once everything's protected. But when you do it from strength, not weakness. Gather proof. Photos, documents, anything that shows the abuse." I nodded slowly. For the first time in years, I had a plan. We talked for hours. Arthur reviewed each document, taking copies for his records. Beverly offered to keep the originals at her house so Gregory and Michelle wouldn't find them. When they left around 5, I stood in the doorway watching them go, clutching the small folder that represented my new beginning. I felt exhausted but strangely alive. The house was silent again, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt like the calm before a storm, one that I would finally be ready to unleash. When the sound of Gregory's car echoed in the driveway an hour later, I straightened my shoulders and waited. The woman they thought was weak had awakened, and soon they would see it. At 6 o'clock, I heard the familiar rumble of the car engine outside, followed by the slam of the front door and the sound of laughter. Gregory and Michelle entered the house carrying glossy shopping bags, their arms full of luxury store logos that seemed to mock my frugality. Their faces were bright, carefree, unaware of the storm waiting for them inside. I stood in the living room, my heart pounding but my expression steady. When they noticed me standing there, their smiles faltered. "Hey, Mom," Gregory said casually, setting the bags down. "What are you doing standing there? We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice calm, almost too calm. Michelle rolled her eyes. "Now, we're tired, Elinor. It's been a long day." A long day of shopping with my stolen money, I thought. This can't wait. I replied, forcing the tremor out of my voice. Gregory sighed, already annoyed. "Fine, what is it?" For a brief second, I imagined throwing the evidence folder in their faces, screaming every truth I'd learned. But Arthur's words echoed in my head. "Not yet, not until you're protected." I took a slow breath. Tomorrow morning, I want us to go to the bank together." Gregory frowned. "The bank? Why?" "There are strange charges on my account." I said carefully, "I want to review everything in person." A flicker crossed his eyes. Quick, sharp, unmistakable fear. It vanished as fast as it came. "They're probably your medical bills, Mom," he said with forced nonchalance, "or the utility payments." "No," I said, "these are large transfers. I want to understand where they went." Michelle crossed her arms, her face tightening. "Eleanor, don't insult Gregory. He's been managing your finances because you don't understand all that stuff." I felt my jaw tighten. That's exactly why I need to go myself to understand. Gregory and Michelle exchanged a silent glance, the kind that carries more meaning than words. "I can't go tomorrow," Gregory said suddenly. "I have a job interview." "Where?" I asked. "At a tech company. It's important." His voice was too quick, too rehearsed. A lie. I saw the truth flicker in his eyes, but I pretended to accept it. "Then the day after tomorrow," I said. Michelle groaned, opening her fridge and pulling out a bottle of wine. "God, what a hassle," she muttered. "If you're so worried, check your account online. Gregory showed you how." "He never gave me the password," I said flatly. "I'll wait until I'm at the bank." Michelle poured herself a glass, then another for Gregory. "They didn't offer me any." "You know what, Mom?" Gregory said after a long drink, his tone suddenly defensive. "You're being ungrateful after everything we've done for you." I laughed softly, bitterly. "Everything you've done for me." He gestured around. "We live here to take care of you. We could be in our own place, living our lives, but we're here sacrificing, putting up with things, sacrificing." I asked quietly, "In my house, using my money, eating my food?" He didn't respond. "No one asked you to stay," I added. The silence that followed was sharp, dangerous. Michelle slammed her glass down on the table. "You know what? I'm sick of this attitude. You came back from the hospital yesterday, looking at us like we're villains. We've done nothing wrong." I never said that. I murmured, but she kept going, her voice rising. "Oh, but you think it. We can see it. You act like we owe you something just because you birthed Gregory." "I gave him everything," I whispered, but my voice cracked halfway. "Everything." Michelle laughed cruelly. "You gave him a mediocre life in a cheap house in a boring neighborhood. You raised him small, limited. We've had to fight twice as hard to overcome your mistakes." Gregory looked away, not stopping her, not defending me. Each word hit harder than the last, as though she enjoyed tearing me down piece by piece. "Enough," Gregory muttered weakly, but Michelle wasn't done. "No, it's time she hears it. You're a burden, Eleanor, you always have been. Gregory's too nice to say it, but I'm not. Living here is exhausting. Tolerating you is exhausting." The tears came before I could stop them. I didn't even try to hide them. "If it's such a sacrifice," I said softly, "then leave. Leave whenever you want." Gregory stood, his expression turning cold. "Mom, this is our house as much as it's yours. Dad would have wanted it that way. A family house. Your father left it to me," I said. "He trusted me to keep it safe." Gregory shook his head. "He assumed you'd share it with your family, with us." That word, share, twisted in his mouth like poison. Michelle began gathering the shopping bags. "Come on, Greg," she said dismissively. "I'm not wasting another minute on this." They went upstairs, leaving me standing in the middle of my own living room, trembling. Their laughter started again minutes later, muffled through the ceiling, carefree and cruel. They hadn't believed a word I said. They never would. But I didn't need them to believe me anymore. I just needed to act. I went back to my small room, shut the door, and took out my phone. My fingers shook as I typed a message to Beverly. "I need to go to the bank first thing tomorrow. Can Arthur come with us?" Her reply came almost instantly, of course. "We'll pick you up at 8. I put the phone aside and sat on my bed. Upstairs, I could hear Gregory and Michelle moving around, the faint hum of the television, their laughter. They probably thought I was still the same broken woman who would cry herself to sleep and forgive them by morning, but that woman was gone. I looked at the empty wall across from me and whispered into the still air, "You won't win again." That night, I didn't eat dinner. I wasn't hungry. The exhaustion that came over me was deep but not despairing. It was the weariness before battle. I thought of Bernard, my late husband, and imagined his kind face, the way he used to smile when he came home from work, covered in dust, but proud of what he'd built. "Forgive me, Bernard," I whispered. "I let them destroy what you worked for, but I promise you I'll fix it." I lay down on my narrow bed and listened to the sounds of the house, Michel's laughter, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator. Every noise reminded me of how much I had lost, but also of how close I was to taking it back. I closed my eyes and pictured the morning to come, the moment I would step into that bank, the moment I would reclaim my name, my dignity, my life. For years, I had let guilt and love blind me. I had believed that being a mother meant endless forgiveness, but motherhood didn't mean surrender. It didn't mean sacrificing my peace for people who only wanted my possessions. As sleep finally began to pull me under, I felt something new rising inside me, something cold and clear as steel, resolve. Tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. The morning arrived gray and silent, the kind of morning that felt suspended in time, waiting for something to happen. I rose before dawn, washed my face, and dressed carefully in my best clothes, the faded blue cardigan and the gray skirt I used to wear to church. They were simple, but they made me feel composed, dignified. When I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. My eyes, though ringed with fatigue, burned with purpose. For years, I had looked at my reflection and seen only weariness. Now, there was something new in it, strength. I packed the folder of evidence into my old leather purse, took a deep breath, and stepped out of my room. Gregory and Michel were still asleep upstairs, their snores faintly audible through the ceiling. For a brief moment, I stood in the kitchen looking at the two refrigerators again, the silent symbols of everything that had gone wrong. One stood for greed, arrogance, and betrayal, the other for the simple life I had once cherished. I touched the handle of my old fridge gently, almost like saying goodbye to a loyal friend, and whispered, "Hold on a little longer." Then I turned and walked out of the house without a sound. Beverly and Arthur were already waiting in the car outside. When I stepped into the back seat, Beverly turned around and smiled reassuringly. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for a long time," I said quietly. The drive to the bank felt endless. The streets were waking up slowly, children waiting for buses, shopkeepers unlocking doors, the faint hum of morning life. But for me, the world outside was distant, almost unreal. My mind was fixed on what was coming. Arthur, sitting beside Beverly, glanced at me through the mirror. "Remember," he said calmly, "you don't have to explain anything to them. I'll handle the technical parts. You just tell the truth." I nodded, clutching my purse tighter. "What if Gregory already moved the money?" I asked. "Then we'll trace it." Arthur replied firmly, "Every transfer leaves a trail. Banks can freeze suspicious accounts immediately once we report the fraud." His voice had a quiet authority that soothed me. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear someone say we'll handle it. For so long, it had always been I'll handle it myself. When we arrived, the sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting soft light on the glass doors of the bank. Arthur led the way inside. The air smelled of paper, coffee, and faint perfume. A young teller greeted us politely. "Good morning, how can I help you?" Arthur showed his identification and introduced me. "This is Mrs. Eleanor Hayes," he said. "She needs to report fraudulent activity on her accounts and request an immediate freeze on unauthorized transactions." The teller's friendly expression faded into professionalism. "Of course, please have a seat." She motioned for us to wait while she called a manager. Within minutes, a woman in her 40s arrived, her expression alert and sympathetic. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm the branch manager, Caroline Turner. Can you tell me what happened?" I nodded and opened my folder, laying out the documents carefully. The bank statements, the forged credit card application, the transfers I never made. Caroline's eyes widened as she scanned them. "These are serious," she murmured. "You're saying your son had access to your account?" "Yes," I said. "I trusted him. I didn't know he was taking my money." Arthur leaned forward. "We need to confirm all linked accounts, credit lines, and loan applications in her name, especially any recent home equity requests." Caroline nodded quickly, typing on her computer. The clicking of keys filled the small office like a rhythm of exposure, truth being uncovered one keystroke at a time. "Here it is," Caroline said after a moment. "There's an active home equity loan application for $50,000 filed last week. Can you cancel it?" I asked urgently, immediately. She replied, "I'll mark it as fraudulent and notify the underwriting department. It'll be frozen within the hour." I exhaled shakily, realizing I had been holding my breath. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt safe. Just a little. "What about my bank account?" I asked. Caroline turned her screen toward us. "There have been multiple withdrawals and transfers to an account under the name G. Hayes. Is that your son?" "Yes." I said softly. "Freeze both." Arthur said firmly, "Mrs. Hayes will open new accounts today with new credentials, and the bank will conduct a full audit. You'll need to contact your fraud department and file a report under elder financial abuse." Caroline nodded, her tone all business now. "Of course, Mr. Dawson. I'll also flag her account for legal review and add security notes. From now on, no one can access her information without her written consent." As the papers were printed and signed, I felt something inside me loosen, a weight lifting off my chest that I hadn't even realized. I carried. Each signature I added was a small act of reclaiming my life. When we were done, Caroline looked at me kindly. "Mrs. Hayes, I want you to know you're not alone. This happens more often than people realize, but few have the courage to face it. You did the right thing." Her words made my throat tighten, but I managed a faint smile. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely steady. Arthur gathered the copies and slipped them into his briefcase. "Now your accounts are safe," he said. "The next step is to document everything. Every insult, every threat, every way they've used your home or your money against you. We'll use that to support a restraining order and potential criminal charges." The idea of police, courts, and lawyers terrified me, but the fear felt smaller now, overshadowed by something stronger. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said. As we stepped outside, the sun had climbed higher, warm against my face. Beverly slipped her arm through mine as we walked back to the car. "You did wonderfully," she said. "I couldn't have done it without you." I admitted. She smiled. "You could have. You just forgot you were strong." Those words stayed with me as we drove home. I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets roll by. For the first time, the world didn't look dull or faded. It looked alive again, full of possibility. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was someone fighting back. But as the car turned onto my street, the unease returned. Gregory's car was still in the driveway. I had hoped he would be gone, but seeing it there made my pulse quicken. "Do you want us to come in with you?" Beverly asked gently. "No," I said after a pause. "Not yet. I need to face them myself." Arthur nodded. "Call us if anything happens, and keep that folder safe. Don't let them near it." I promised I would, then stepped out of the car, clutching my purse like a lifeline. When I entered the house, the air felt heavy, thick with tension. Gregory was sitting at the table, his phone in hand, a scowl on his face. "Where were you?" he demanded. "Out." I replied. "You took your documents with you," he said, his tone sharp. "Why?" "Because they're mine," I said simply. "I don't have to explain that to you." His eyes narrowed. "You went to the bank, didn't you?" I didn't answer. "Got it, Mom," he snapped, slamming his phone down. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've done exactly what I should have done," I said, my voice steady now. "I've protected myself." His face darkened with fury. "You stupid, ungrateful." Enough. I interrupted, louder than I'd ever spoken to him before. The sound startled even me. "You will not speak to me like that again." For a moment he looked genuinely stunned. Michelle appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her robe. "What's going on?" she asked groggily. Gregory turned to her. She froze the accounts, all of them. Michelle's eyes widened. "What? You can't do that," she shouted at me. "That money's for all of us. It's mine," I said coldly, "and from now on, you'll both start paying for what you use in this house." Gregory's jaw tightened. "You think you can just cut us off?" "Yes," I said, walking past him toward my room. "I can, and I have." Behind me, I could hear their angry whispers rising, Michelle's voice shrill with panic. I closed my door, locked it, and sat on the bed. My hands were still shaking, but this time not from fear, from power. For the first time, I had won a battle. It was only the beginning, but it was enough to make me believe that victory was possible. That evening, the house felt charged, as though every wall held its breath, waiting for the explosion that was sure to come. From behind my door, I could hear Gregory and Michelle pacing, whispering, arguing in quick, angry tones. Every so often, one of them would shout my name, but I refused to answer. I sat on my bed, hands folded in my lap, staring at the folder that held the remnants of my old trust and the birth of my freedom. My heart still pounded from the confrontation at the bank and the fury on Gregory's face when he realized I had taken back control. Yet beneath the trembling, there was a steady, glowing calm, a sense of justice finally taking shape. They had spent years turning me into a background figure in my own life, but now they couldn't touch a single dollar, couldn't sign a single paper, couldn't move a single step without me. That thought alone was enough to keep me steady. I heard Michelle slam a cupboard door and mutter something about calling a lawyer, but I knew they wouldn't. Lawyers cost money, and now they had none of mine to spend. Around 7, there was a knock on my door, sharp, impatient. I stayed silent. Another knock followed, louder this time. "Mom," Gregory said, his tone dripping with forced patience. "Open the door. We need to talk." I didn't move. "If you don't open this door," he warned, "we're not going to be able to fix this." That word, fix, made me almost laugh. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He wanted control again. I remained silent until his voice grew colder. "Fine, stay in there. But remember, we live here too. You can't lock yourself away forever." His footsteps retreated, and I finally exhaled. My legs trembled slightly as I stood and went to the window. The street outside was calm, the sky painted in fading shades of pink and gray. Beverly's house sat across from mine, her porch light already glowing. I could see her silhouette in the window, and when she noticed me watching, she lifted a hand in a silent gesture of reassurance. That small act steadied me again. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. When night fully settled, I heard the television turn on in the living room, loud enough to shake the walls. It was their way of reasserting dominance, a childish attempt to remind me they still occupied the larger space. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my notebook and began writing. Every insult, every lie, every incident of financial or emotional abuse I could remember. Arthur had told me that details mattered, that dates and patterns could build a case stronger than anger alone. So I wrote the day Michelle installed her fridge, the time Gregory took my pension card, the weeks when they ignored my calls from the hospital, the nights I heard them mocking me. Each memory was painful, but with every sentence, the pain turned into something sharper evidence. By the time I finished, my hand ached, but my heart felt lighter. I closed the notebook and placed it with the folder beneath my pillow, a small fortress of truth. Around midnight, I finally drifted into uneasy sleep. I dreamed of Bernard. He stood in our old garden, sunlight on his face, smiling that patient smile I had loved all my life. "You did the right thing, Ellie," he said in the dream. "Don't be afraid." I wanted to reach out, to tell him how much I missed him, but when I tried to speak, my throat filled with tears, and I woke with a start. The house was silent again, too silent. Something felt off. I sat up, listening. A floorboard creaked outside my door, followed by the faint whisper of movement. My heart raced. Gregory. I called softly, no answer. Then I heard the handle rattle, slowly at first, then harder. Mom, open the door. Gregory hissed. We need to talk, now. His tone wasn't calm anymore. It was low, menacing. I stood, pressing my back to the wall. We can talk in the morning. I said through the door, no, we'll talk now. He snapped, slamming his palm against the wood. You think you can ruin us, freeze everything, make us look like criminals. You're going to fix this tonight. Michelle's voice joined his from behind. She's losing her mind, Greg. She's trying to get rid of us. Shut up. He muttered, then turned back to me. Open this door before his voice stopped mid. Threat, maybe because he realized the sound of his anger would draw attention from neighbors. I stayed perfectly still until I heard them walk away. Then I went to the dresser and quietly pulled out my phone. My hands trembled as I typed a message to Beverly. He tried to open my door. I'm scared. Within seconds, she replied, lock it and stay put. I'm calling Arthur and the police right now. Do not open that door for any reason. I locked it again, wedging a chair under the handle, and sat back down on the bed, heart pounding in my ears. The minutes crawled by until, in the distance, I finally heard the faint wail of sirens. The noise grew louder, stopping right outside. Lights flashed through my curtains. Then came the pounding on the front door, but this time it wasn't Gregory. It was the police. Police, open up. Gregory shouted something incoherent before the heavy sound of footsteps filled the hall. Through the thin door, I could hear confusion, Michelle's high-pitched protests, the officers' firm, controlled voices. One of them knocked gently on my door. Mrs. Hayes, it's Officer Daniels. Are you okay? I opened it a crack enough to see two uniformed officers standing there, their faces calm but alert. Behind them, Gregory stood pale and furious, Michelle clutching his arm. She's lying, Gregory barked. This is a misunderstanding. The officer ignored him and looked at me. Did they threaten you, ma'am? I swallowed hard. He tried to open my door. I said quietly. I told him no, and he kept pushing. The officer nodded and took notes. You did the right thing by calling. We'll file a report. He turned to Gregory. Sir, I suggest you stay away from this room tonight. Any more disturbance, and we'll remove you from the premises. Michelle started to protest, but he cut her off. That goes for you too, ma'am. Their authority filled the house like a shield. For the first time in years, Gregory had no words. He just stared at me, his face twisted with disbelief and rage. I met his gaze steadily. Good night, Gregory, I said, my voice steady as stone. He didn't respond. The officers left after ensuring I was safe, and I locked my door again. Through the window, I saw Beverly standing on her porch in her robe, watching until the patrol car drove off. When our eyes met, she nodded once, a silent promise that I was not alone. The house eventually fell quiet again. I sat awake for hours, the adrenaline still coursing through me. What had just happened was terrifying, yes, but also liberating. I had drawn a line, and now it was enforced by law. Gregory knew it too. He could no longer intimidate me without consequence. I realized then that fear had been their greatest weapon, and now that I had faced it, they had nothing left to hold over me. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I finally lay down, exhausted but unbroken. I knew there would be consequences, more fights, more resistance. But the tide had turned. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt safe enough to close my eyes and believe that tomorrow might belong to me. The next morning began with a strange, tense calm. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting soft gold across the faded wallpaper of my little room. But the air outside was heavy, thick with unspoken rage. I could hear Gregory and Michelle moving around the kitchen, their voices low and sharp, occasionally rising before falling again. Every sound carried that same energy, panic disguised as anger, fear masked by noise. I stayed quiet, letting them stew in the mess they had created. My mind was clear now, almost unnaturally so. The night before had changed everything. The sight of police officers standing in my doorway had stripped them of the illusion of control, and though they didn't know it yet, that single moment had marked the beginning of their downfall. When I finally stepped out of my room, Michelle was at the sink, slamming dishes into soapy water, her hair messy, her face pale with exhaustion and rage. Gregory sat at the table, staring into a cup of cold coffee. He didn't look up when I entered. "Good morning," I said, as if it were any ordinary day. Michelle turned, her eyes blazing. "You called the police on your own son," she hissed. "He tried to break into my room." I replied calmly, "I had every right." "You're insane." She spat. "Completely insane. Do you realize what you've done? You've ruined everything." I looked her squarely in the eye. "No, Michelle, I stopped you from ruining me." Gregory finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You think this is over. You embarrassed us in front of the whole neighborhood. You made us look like criminals. You did that yourselves," I said softly. I just let the truth in. His jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might explode again, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He looked away, muttering under his breath. I moved to the table and poured myself some tea from the old kettle. My hands didn't tremble anymore. Every movement I made was deliberate, steady, confident. Michelle laughed bitterly. "You think this act is going to last. You can't manage this house alone. You're old, frail, dependent. You need us." I sipped the tea, savoring the warmth. No, I needed peace, and I finally have it. That shut her up for a moment, but I could see the calculation flickering in her eyes. She was realizing that their source of comfort, the money, the control, the free home, was slipping away. Gregory leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "Mom," he said finally, "let's be practical. We can make this right. You overreacted. We'll fix the accounts, you'll give us access again, and we'll forget this ever happened." His tone was smooth, rehearsed, the voice of the manipulator I now recognized too well. "No, Gregory," I said firmly. "You won't touch my accounts again. Not ever. You'll start paying rent if you want to stay here. And if you can't, you'll leave." His expression hardened. "You can't just throw us out," he snapped. "Legally, you can't. Arthur's already handling it." I said, watching his confidence falter, "There's an eviction process starting this week. You'll get a notice soon." For a moment, he was speechless, his face draining of color. Michelle gasped. "You talked to a lawyer?" "Yes," I said, "a very good one." Gregory slammed his hand on the table so hard the cup rattled. "This is unbelievable," he shouted. "After everything I've done for you, after everything you've taken from me," I interrupted. "Don't twist it anymore, Gregory. You didn't help me. You drained me." My voice didn't rise, but its steadiness carried more power than any scream could. Michelle tried to intervene, but I cut her off with a look. "You both will leave this house before the month ends. If you don't, the police will make sure you do." Gregory's face turned red with fury. He pushed his chair back violently and stood, looming over me. "You think you're stronger than us now," he sneered. "You think because you called the cops once, you've won? No," I said, meeting his glare. "I've just started winning." The tension in the air was electric. He stood there, breathing hard, then suddenly turned and stormed out of the room. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Michelle followed him moments later, muttering curses under her breath. When the house finally went silent again, I felt an immense stillness spread through me, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. I sat down slowly, clutching my cup of tea. The sound of birds outside seemed louder now, clearer, as if the world had been waiting for this quiet. Beverly came over an hour later, bringing fresh scones and that gentle smile of hers. Arthur called. She said as soon as she stepped in, "He's already filed the petition. They'll receive the notice within 3 days." I closed my eyes in relief. "Thank you," I said. "I didn't think it would happen so fast. Arthur doesn't waste time," she said with a small laugh. "He's seen too many people wait until it's too late." She sat with me at the table, pouring tea, and for the first time in a long while, my home felt like home again. We talked quietly about simple things. the garden, her cat, the weather. But beneath every word was the shared understanding that something monumental had shifted. "You know," Beverly said after a while, "you've done something most people never find the courage to do. You stood up to your own blood. That takes strength." I smiled faintly. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like survival. Sometimes. She said softly, "They're the same thing." Later that afternoon, I walked through the house slowly, taking in every corner as though seeing it for the first time. The sunlight fell across the floorboards, catching on the dust that sparkled in the air. For years I had moved through this place quietly, as if I didn't belong. Now I walked with purpose. I straightened the pictures on the wall, opened the curtains wide, and for the first time in months, opened the windows to let in the crisp autumn air. It smelled clean, alive. I took down Michelle's ridiculous labels from the fridge, each Shelley, peeled away like a small victory. I threw them into the trash and wiped the door clean until it gleamed. Then I opened both fridges and smiled faintly. The new one was half empty now, most of the expensive items already consumed or spoiled. The old one, though smaller, still hummed faithfully. I filled it with simple groceries later that day: milk, bread, butter, and a few apples from Beverly's garden. It felt symbolic, like reclaiming space, one shelf at a time. That night, as darkness fell again, I sat on the porch wrapped in my shawl, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. I thought about how close I had come to losing everything, to losing myself, but I also thought about the quiet power that had carried me through, the will to endure, to rebuild, to reclaim. I wasn't naive. I knew Gregory wouldn't leave peacefully. There would be more shouting, more pleading, maybe even more threats, but I also knew something he didn't. That once a woman rediscovers her voice, she can't be silenced again. I looked up at the night sky, stars scattered faintly across the dark, and whispered to Bernard, "I think I made you proud today." The breeze rustled through the trees, soft and steady, almost like a response. For the first time in years, I went to bed without fear. The following days unfolded like the slow untying of a long, painful knot. Every morning I woke up to the same uneasy silence, the kind that fills a house when its occupants are pretending not to hate each other. Gregory and Michelle stayed out most of the day, returning only at night, usually drunk or exhausted, their voices brittle with tension. I could sense them unraveling, whispered arguments behind closed doors, slammed drawers, Michelle's muffled sobs that sometimes broke through the walls. I didn't feel pity anymore. Whatever they were suffering was a consequence of their own cruelty, a debt long overdue. I spent my mornings with Beverly, who had become more like family to me than my own blood. Together, we walked through her garden, trimming the flowers and drinking tea under the oak tree. Those quiet hours healed me more than any medicine ever could. "How are you sleeping?" she asked one morning as we sat among the rose bushes. "Better," I said. "The nightmares are fading. The house still feels heavy sometimes, but it's mine again. That's enough." She smiled softly. "You know, Eleanor, sometimes peace comes disguised as loneliness, but it's still peace." When I returned home that afternoon, I found Gregory sitting in the living room, surrounded by piles of unopened bills. Michelle wasn't there. He looked older somehow, his eyes sunken, his shoulders slumped under the weight of something more than anger. For a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who ran to me after nightmares, who cried when his father worked late. But the image vanished as soon as he looked up, his expression hardening. "She's gone," he said flatly. "Michelle packed her things and left this morning." I paused in the doorway. Where did she go? To her sister's, I think. She said she was done living like this. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "I guess she finally realized there's nothing left to take," I said quietly. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable but strangely human. "You really hate me now, don't you?" he said suddenly. "No," I replied, sitting down across from him. I don't hate you, Gregory. I hate what you became. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. I just wanted a better life, he said weakly. I was tired of struggling. And you thought stealing from your mother would make it better. He looked down at his hands. I didn't think of it like that, it just happened. One thing led to another. Michelle kept pushing, and I. He stopped, his voice breaking. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked softly, and somewhere outside, a dog barked. I could feel years of love and disappointment swirling inside me, colliding like waves. Do you know what hurts the most? I said finally. It's not the money, Gregory. It's that you looked at me, your mother, and saw nothing worth protecting. You saw an old woman, easy to manipulate. I spent my life believing you'd carry my kindness forward, but you used it against me. He didn't reply. I could see tears forming in his eyes, but I didn't reach out. That part of me, the part that always comforted him, was gone now. Arthur's papers will come tomorrow. I said gently but firmly. You'll have 30 days to leave. I'll give you that much time because you're my son. But after that, Gregory, this house will no longer be yours in any way. He nodded slowly, as if accepting a sentence he already knew was coming. Where will you go? I asked. I don't know. He said hollowly. Maybe stay with a friend, maybe start over. Then start over the right way. I said, find work, take responsibility, fix yourself before there's nothing left of you. He looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time in years, there was something like remorse in his eyes. You really won't forgive me, will you? He asked softly. Forgiveness isn't the problem, I said. Trust is, and once that's gone, forgiveness doesn't fix it. It just helps you move on. That night, I sat alone in the living room after he'd gone upstairs. The house was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel suffocating. It felt empty in a way that was cleansing, like a wound beginning to close. I thought of Bernard again, of the steady way he used to hold my hand when the world felt uncertain. I imagined him sitting beside me now, proud, maybe even relieved. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that I had done right, not just for me, but for the memory of the life we built together. Around midnight, I heard Gregory come downstairs. He stood in the doorway, hesitating. Mom, he said softly, can we have dinner tomorrow, just us? His voice was uncertain, fragile. For a moment, I wanted to say no to remind him of everything he had done, but something inside me stopped. Maybe it was that last shred of love that refuses to die, no matter how deep the wound. Yes, I said finally, tomorrow. He nodded, his eyes glistening with something that might have been gratitude. Good night, he whispered. Good night, Gregory, I replied. When he went back upstairs, I sat there for a long time, wondering if redemption was truly possible, or if some cracks could never be sealed. The next day was clear and bright. Beverly came over in the morning with cinnamon rolls and a smile. Arthur called. She said, "The eviction notice has been filed and approved. It's official." I thanked her quietly, though my thoughts were elsewhere. That evening, Gregory and I sat at the table together for dinner, our first meal alone in years. The food was simple: soup, bread, tea. The silence was heavy at first, but then he began to talk. Not excuses this time, but stories. He spoke about his childhood, about the times he felt like he disappointed his father, about the pressure he carried to make something of himself. As he spoke, I saw glimpses of the boy I once knew flicker through the cracks of the man he had become. When he finished, we sat quietly for a long while. I don't know if I can ever make it right. He said finally, maybe not. I said, but you can try. That's what matters now. After he went to bed that night, I stood in the doorway of his old room, watching him sleep. He looked peaceful, younger somehow, stripped of all the arrogance and greed. I closed the door softly and whispered to myself, maybe this is the beginning of something new, not for him, but for me. As I walked back to my room, I felt an unfamiliar stillness settle inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was freedom, the quiet, steady kind that comes when you've finally taken back your life. The house, my house, no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like home again, and that was enough. The days that followed were strangely calm, as if the house itself was recovering from years of noise and tension. Gregory kept mostly to himself, spending hours on the phone or out looking for work, though I suspected he was really trying to delay the inevitable. I didn't chase him about it. My energy was no longer tied to what he did or didn't do. I spent my mornings in quiet routine, watering the plants, reading the newspaper on the porch, sharing tea with Beverly whenever she stopped by. The air in the house had changed. It was lighter, clearer, no longer thick with hostility. Even the ticking of the clock sounded different, no longer oppressive, but rhythmic, steady, alive. Sometimes I caught myself waiting for the old tension to return, for Michelle's sharp laughter or Gregory's angry muttering, but those sounds never came. What replaced them was silence, not the fearful silence of before, but one that felt like rest after a long storm. Arthur called me twice that week, updating me on the paperwork. "The eviction notice has been officially served," he said. "He'll have 8 more days before legal removal. If he tries anything, threats, tampering, intimidation, you let me know immediately." His voice carried both kindness and precision. "Thank you, Arthur," I told him. "I'll be fine. I think he's finally realizing it's over. Maybe," Arthur said thoughtfully, "but stay cautious. Guilt can make men desperate." His warning lingered in my mind, though I didn't feel afraid anymore. Something inside me had shifted permanently. The woman who once trembled at raised voices, who apologized for her own existence, no longer lived here. I was someone else now, stronger, still fragile in places, but rebuilt. One afternoon, I found Gregory sitting in the backyard, staring blankly at the fence. He didn't hear me approach. "You've been quiet lately," I said softly. He turned, startled, then looked away. "I've been thinking," he murmured. "About everything." I waited. He rubbed his face with his hands, sighing deeply. "I've been a terrible son." "Yes," I said plainly, "you have." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "You don't hold back anymore." "I've learned not to," I replied. He looked at me then, and for once there was no defiance, no anger, only regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say it." I nodded, not out of acceptance but acknowledgement. "Thank you for saying it," I said. "That's more than I thought I'd ever hear." He swallowed hard. "I don't know what I'll do next. I don't have much left. You'll figure it out." I said, "You're still young enough to start over, but you'll have to do it without me carrying you." He nodded again, staring at his hands. The wind stirred the leaves around us, and for the first time in a long while, we sat together in silence without resentment between us. That evening, Beverly came over with dinner. She'd made shepherd's pie and insisted I take the larger portion. "You look different," she said as we ate at the table. "Lighter, happier." I smiled. "I think I am." "And Gregory?" she asked carefully. "He's quiet." I said, "I think the weight of it all has finally settled on him. Maybe losing everything is what he needed to wake up." She nodded. "Some lessons only come through loss." After dinner, we washed the dishes together, chatting about small things. The blooming roses, a stray cat that had taken to visiting her yard. When she left, the house felt warm, full of a peace I hadn't known in years. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the porch, watching the sunset spill over the rooftops in shades of amber and red. The world looked gentle again. I realized then that peace doesn't always come through forgiveness or revenge. It comes when you reclaim your space, your worth, your voice. Later that night, Gregory came downstairs again. He hesitated in the doorway, holding an envelope. "This came for you," he said quietly, placing it on the table, "from the bank." I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter confirming that the fraudulent loan had been fully canceled and all stolen funds were being restored. The relief that washed over me was indescribable, like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. "That's good news," I said. Gregory nodded, eyes downcast. "I'm glad." There was an awkward pause before he added, "I found a job. It's just warehouse work for now, but it's something." "That's a start," I said, and meant it. He smiled faintly, a small, tired smile that reminded me of the boy he once was. "I'll be moving out soon," he said, "maybe next week." "Take your time," I said. "But make sure you actually go." He gave a short laugh. "I will." When he went back upstairs, I sat with the letter for a long time, turning it over in my hands. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that I had survived, proof that I had taken back everything they tried to steal from me. My home, my dignity, my future. I went to the old cabinet where Bernard's photograph stood and placed the letter beside it. "We're safe now," I whispered to the picture. His smiling face caught the faint glow of the lamp, and for a brief moment I could almost feel his approval, like warmth spreading through the room. The next few days passed quietly. Gregory started packing small things: books, clothes, shoes. He didn't say much, and I didn't press him. There was nothing left to say. One morning I found a note on the kitchen table. "Mom, thank you for letting me stay this long. I'll send you my new address once I'm settled. I'm sorry for everything." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that felt real. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my journal. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I cooked breakfast for myself: eggs, toast, and tea, and ate it while sunlight poured through the window. The house was quiet again, but this time the quiet belonged to me. I looked around at the